Hello there. Welcome to another episode of the On the Way Home podcast, where we talk all things housing, homelessness, health, and much, much more. I'm your host, Michael Braithwaite from Blue Door. Blue Door, my agency, has been around for over 42 years now, helping our most vulnerable citizens across York, Peel, and Durham. We help them find housing in various different capacities, whether it's emergency, transitional, or permanent. And we get them healthy with our healthcare services and provide them with meaningful and well-paying employment that helps to prevent homelessness or keep it very, very short. That and much, much more. I'm not even touching on it. I work with over 120 brilliant people. Check us out at bluedoor.ca. Let's talk about today's podcast. This is our second panel when we talk about seniors and homelessness. And I think quite often we think of homelessness, we think that, I don't know, maybe it was just me, but we're under the illusion that our seniors are kind of well taken care of, that it doesn't exist. By the time you reach that age, services are in place. And so let's focus, we've got so much to focus on homelessness, but it doesn't really, it doesn't really land on people's radar that there's so many seniors facing homelessness. In fact, it's one of the fastest growing populations that is experiencing homelessness. So I was reading through the paper as I do, and I saw Jill Alston. She had put out a paper on seniors and homelessness in Toronto and how the system was failing them. So I reached out to Jill, and she said, "You know what? I will come talk to you, but I'm going to bring three brilliant friends." And so she brought Lara Nixon, who's a family physician from Calgary, who talks about what she's seen in some of the seniors visiting her practice and some of her hopes, and talks but through kind of a West Canada lens through Calgary. So Jill brought her colleague, Alesia Campbell. Alesia's an outreach worker for seniors. And man, I loved Alesia's energy in this podcast. I mean, such a happy, wonderful, you imagine her like the perfect person to be doing outreach to seniors. And she shares what she's seeing out there, what she's hearing from the seniors she works with, what's missing. And as well, we are joined by finally Denise Cloche, who's who has a PhD in health geography. And first of all, she tells us what the heck that is. And it really is about people and place and how that matters. And Denise is brilliant in this podcast. We talk about some of the challenges seniors are facing. We talk about some of the solutions, who's doing it well. We talk about some of the hopes for the future that included cloning Alesia, because she's so great at what she does, and the work at St. Mike's that both her and Jill do. But it is a wonderful podcast that sheds a lot of light on the challenges and the solutions around seniors and homelessness. We had another pod on seniors and housing. This one kind of dives in more to the homelessness end of things. It is so educating and creates a ton of awareness. We have four brilliant people that join us. Take a listen. I think you'll enjoy it. Welcome to the pod, everyone. So pumped to have you on. I am blessed with four brilliant people today as my guests, not one, but four. Before we get into talking about seniors and homelessness and the wonderful research that's been done in your experience, I have to ask you the standard question that I ask everyone that comes on the podcast, and that is, what does home mean to you? Now, because there's four of you all directed, Alesia, we'll start with you, then we'll go to Lara, and then Jill, and then Denise.
All right, Alesia, A first. What does home mean to me? I mean, from what I've seen, it really is what other people think home is. It's security, it's safety. It could be a physical place, but for me, it's really just the security around it, right?
Love it. Simple,
Very
and that's
simple.
absolutely. No, that's well, and that's what it is. And quite often we hear it's not about four walls and a roof, it's about that security. Lara?
Totally agree with what Alesia said. Might just add that it's a place where you can be yourself and you can connect with others or connect with different parts of yourself in as much as you're comfortable in wanting to do so.
Love that. Thanks, Lara. Jill?
I think you guys have summed things up really well. I would sort of think, comfort, security, freedom of expression and being yourself, and just that sense of belonging.
Amazing. Thanks. And Denise, what do you think?
I think those are all brilliant answers, and not sure I can add a whole lot. I guess one of the words that comes to mind for me is sanctuary a lot, or refuge, a place that which really captures the safety ideas, and the place of self-expression and autonomy are two other things I'd add.
Wonderful. And all very common themes when we ask this, and we've asked it over 200 times, and people talk about that. Not once do people mention four walls and a roof. So thank you with that. Now, I always think back to when we were in, say, grades 1 through 5, and they would bring in different parents to talk about maybe careers you want to go into in the future. Probably none of you said what you're doing now. Wasn't top of mind. So I want to understand your journeys a little bit. So this time we're going to start with Denise. We'll go to Lara, then Jill, and then Alesia. We'll reverse the order a little bit. Just your journey into this space and what you're doing now.
Okay, thank you. My journey started not too long ago, 2019, I guess, when I was working with an honors undergraduate student who was interested in older women renters' experiences. And so that sort of provided an entry for me to kind of want to look a little bit more broadly at experiences of homelessness and housing insecurity. And so that's where it all started for me, not too long ago, but lots of work to do and lots of things to discover and understand.
I'm a family physician, and in the last couple of decades, I've worked in inner city Calgary and had the opportunity to meet and learn from people in a lot of different contexts. A lot of people living independently, but sometimes aging into situations where their supports and the resources that were available and acceptable to them just weren't a good fit. And so observing those, situations of precarity and people sometimes ending up in hospital for very long periods of time, I had opportunity to learn a lot from working alongside people from all different backgrounds in a much more social, sort of integrated social and medical model of care. A lot of leadership from social workers there, and learning a lot more about inclusive approaches to housing that were aimed at people who were not able to find housing elsewhere in their 50s. And so, yeah, that's kind of what really got me rolling into this field.
Oh, I guess was it me or you, Alesia?
I think it's you, Jill.
Okay, I think that's what we said the order was, but I am blanking now. So I'm a geriatrician. I actually first got an interest in trying to work sort of my clinical work into caring for individuals who are older and experiencing homelessness after doing an elective way back when I was a medical student at Ottawa Inner City Health. And it was just such a transformative learning experience. And one of the most visible things that I saw were, older individuals who are experiencing homelessness. And, I still recall just, being sent to do an intake assessment with an older individual who had newly moved to the shelter, and him like trying to navigate around with his walker, and then talking about, the benefit of being at this shelter where there was a place to store his medications. And at that point, I didn't know that I wanted to necessarily be a geriatrician, but as I did my internal medicine training and then my geriatric training, I knew that I had an interest of intertwining whatever I ended up sort of doing in my clinical practice in doing some outreach work to shelters. And I was just very fortunate to be hired at St. Michael's and have just wonderful divisional members who, found funding to help start the geriatric outreach program to shelters, which Alesia is the counterpart to, and be able to help, to actually get that off the ground and running. So I've just been very fortunate to have individuals hear my interest and then also help to propel it forward.
Well, I guess I'm the outlier because I always knew I wanted to work with seniors. Especially with the social isolation, because when I was in high school, there was this intergenerational conference. And so we got to see the isolation. And I was like, you know what? I want to be a social worker. I want to work as not to help, but as a resource for older adults. And even in university, my undergraduate and graduate degree, I was like, I'm going to work in social work. I'm going to work in gerontology. And it just really offers flexibility. So I could work in the community. I can work with individuals who are experiencing the housing deficit. So I kind of landed into this role after seeing in the community there were so many individuals I was interacting with that were on the verge of being evicted and unable to afford their housing in Midtown Toronto. So, and just hearing stories through other friends and their older adults and not knowing where to get the resources to. So, like Jill mentioned, I was very fortunate to be hired at St. Mike's and meet this lovely team and of us, and then just follow through with it.
St. Mike's does incredible work around supporting individuals experiencing homelessness, as both you do and all four of you do. So thank you for talking a little bit about your journey into this work. So today, obviously, we want to speak about seniors and homelessness. Jill, you recently released a paper in the Canadian Medical Association Journal about the shelter system in Toronto and, quite frankly, how it's failing seniors. How did that come about? How did you land on that? And can you share some of the key findings?
Yeah, so I'd like to take more credit for it, but of course it was one of my mentors, Dr. Sharon Strauss, and also Dr. Steph Burrell and Aaron Orkin, who are much more experienced and knowledgeable about caring for individuals who are experiencing homelessness, who, were coming up with an idea of approaching, trying to put together a piece for the Canadian Medical Association Journal on, different models of care and intertwining sort of healthcare within caring for older adults who are experiencing homelessness, especially on long-term care. And as we started writing, and, they very fortunate to have the opportunity to, step in and take a leading role on authoring the paper. And as we were writing it and putting it out, we're like, the scope of the issue is just so complex, and it's hard to speak about, models of care without dissecting, well, what's the state of the issue? What are the challenges that older adults who are experiencing homelessness, what are those challenges? What are their experiences? So then we ended up doing this analysis piece where we sort of took a global approach to just, presenting what we know about late life homelessness in Canada and how we can go about tackling it. So most of what we, had in that paper or piece was from our review of other literature, and also with some of our own anecdotal experiences in caring for individuals who are experiencing homelessness, and also in some of the research that's coming out of the geriatric outreach program to shelters that Alesia and I are part of, some of our initial program evaluation from that. So I guess some of the key findings, sort of what I said, it's such a complex issue. We know that there's rising numbers of older adults who are experiencing homelessness sort of across Canada, not, just in our, Toronto and Vancouver, where we might think of it. It's really across Canada. I was recently speaking with somebody from out east where they've, it's growing, issue in Atlantic Canada. So it's like really across the country, and really trying to think of, what poses a risk of becoming for the first time in later life, and also what are those factors that go into, individuals where I think there's, continual system and structural failures for having an older person who has difficulty exiting homelessness, or who has cyclical homelessness. And I know we looked into some of the models, different solutions, which I think, my colleagues on the podcast will probably have a better explanations for. So maybe I'll save some of the solutions for later in the podcast, if that's okay.
Absolutely, and thanks for that. And I know that got a ton of coverage and people, which is great because you want to bring attention to, here's a problem. And I think we have some of the solutions that I know, and we'll talk about those too. And I know you talked about one in that article I read around wood green. Lara, let's talk about what you're seeing in Calgary. You talked a little bit about in your introduction what you're seeing in your practice, but uh, we're seeing the numbers continue to grow. Any ideas on why is that? And you know, are you seeing things change in your area, or services being added? What's happening?
Uh, as Jill mentioned, there's some challenges with our available structures and systems, and we are seeing more and more older people, kind of two subpopulations: people who are aging while homeless, and there's quite wide agreement that there's a phenomenon of accelerated aging or premature aging that happens when you are in resource deprived circumstances. And so not getting the nutrition, not getting the shelter and all the things we need to stay healthy and well, more chronic disease, more difficult to manage, more acute illnesses, etc. So somebody who's in their 40s and 50s could be the equivalent of people who are housed, who are much, much older, 70s, and even in their late 70s. So a 20-year age, 15 to 20-year age correction that we use, right? We call older people who are 50. And our systems of care for older people typically have, as a starting point, an age requirement of 65 or older. And so it's very difficult for people to access the supports that they might need in the aged care system. And our aged care systems aren't, they're already overwhelmed by population aging, and they haven't caught up to the folks who grew up in the 60s and their life experiences. And so we've got some issues there. Rehabilitation in aged care is really limited to physical rehabilitation after a fall or a hip fracture. There's no real services or supports for mental health rehabilitation or addiction. There's really zero tolerance related to substance use. Even tobacco is not permitted in most aged care settings, let alone indoor smoking. So if you look at cannabis, alcohol, or illicit substances, street substances, there's just no bad bandwidth in that system. So then if we look to the homeless serving sector, there's been some fabulous progress made as far as reducing homelessness for some subpopulations, younger men especially. The Housing First model, independent living with community-based supports, has been shown really widely to benefit a lot of younger people. But the needs of an older person who is aging while homeless, or who falls into homelessness for the first time later in their lives, which is the other subpopulation that we're seeing, people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s, who are becoming homeless for the first time in their lives. Our homeless serving sector isn't set up to respond to their needs, not in the shelter, not in the transitional or the permanent supportive housing models that are typically on offer. They just don't have the integrated social and medical services that are needed. So
Yeah, well said. I mean, I think at my organization, Blue Door, we run a program for senior men called Forward, and we start that at 50. Because exactly the way what you said, but it's such a interesting thing you talk about that. Yeah, if we define seniors that this is where senior servicing starts, and people are have all those needs much younger because of their circumstance, there's a huge gap there. So thank you for that, Denise. We want to talk first of all. What the heck is a health and social geographer? I think most people think of geography as geography, land, etc. But that's how I've heard in articles you describe yourself. What is that, and what are you seeing on the West Coast when it comes to seniors and housing?
Sure. Thank you, Michael. I love that question. I get asked it a lot in working in this area. And I often resort to the undergraduate's slogan, which used to be, "Without geography, we're nowhere." And I love that because it illustrates that we don't live our lives on the head of a pin. We live them across space and place. And those places that we find ourselves in have some huge implications for our health and wellness, our opportunities for education, some of the constraints we face, you know, the political systems. There's just a lot that happens in places, and it does have a big bearing on our health and wellness. And so that's kind of how I come to this interest in health and homelessness and older women and gender diverse persons. And it kind of, as we said at the outset, thinking about home and not just house, as you know, geographers are very interested in looking at those person and place connections, the dynamics that arise because of who we are and where we are at the same time as well. And so just a little bit on that front, to add to what Lara and Jill and Alesia have been saying, the work that I have been doing has been focusing more on older women and gender diverse persons who similarly are one of the fastest growing populations among the homeless. They tend to be what we call hidden homeless because of fear of their safety and security and trust in engaging with the formal homeless serving system. So that means they're couch surfing, sleeping in their cars, sleeping at the homes of friends until they exhaust those informal supports and then need to engage with the formal serving system. And sometimes that means because they run out of options, they also go back to partners who have been where there's been abuse in the past or intimate partner violence. So women quickly run out of options in the current system, the way that it's configured in terms of the types of housing that is available to them. You know, they need much more, as Lara mentioned, beyond. We do think housing first is very important. We need to have that kind of foundation, that stability of a permanent place to be. But then women and gender diverse people also need more services around them. They need help with overcoming the trauma that they faced, this kind of accumulation of challenges over the life course for those who have cycled in and out of homelessness. And then just as Lara mentioned again too, when older women are entering homelessness later in life, they talk a lot about the fact, people in our study, that, you know, I'm one paycheck away from living on the streets. So that kind of, it's hard for us to imagine that sort of immediate vulnerability, that maybe I'm not going to have a house next month, or I'm at fear of being evicted from my place of residence right now. And so just to end on this question and comment, the hidden homelessness that women experience means that the system is not configured to serve them well. So we're very far behind in the services and supports that are available for this particular population.
Absolutely. And I think too often, I mean, we want to kind of do that one solution for all, and it's just not the same. I mean, the needs of seniors, as you all touch on, right, are much different than they are in youth. I'll tell you, we run a men's emergency program, and so it's ages 18 to 99 or beyond. Very different needs at both ends of the spectrum, and it doesn't make sense. It's not a great mix, right? So we've tried different things to offer different supports, but absolutely right. And I think people hear about hidden homelessness. Sometimes they think of youth, but absolutely exists with seniors as well. Alesia, you are out there, you know, doing outreach with seniors. What are you seeing in Toronto? What are you hearing from them?
Everything and anything. Like I really wish that was an easy answer, because as so I worked on both ends, people who are going to be experiencing homelessness for the first time, that they're being evicted and scrambling around trying to find access to resources and availability of services. And unfortunately, that's the same if they are experiencing just homelessness, because without housing, there is the availability of resources, the accessibility and affordability. I mean, Lara mentioned it as well, with the shelters not being equipped to provide the support needed for older adults if they need appropriate beds, like someone can't sleep on a cot or on the floor. If they might have, of course, arthritis or other health concerns, but that just compounds on everything that makes them them. And just the availability of resources. Sure, there could be an ID clinic, there could be any other supports out there, but just being able to factor in getting there, what time of the day, what the hours are like, if there's other health appointments that they might have, and navigating that, because looking for housing is a full-time job. So when you have housing, you do have a location where your items might be safe, you have a base that you can go to. You might have the items needed, like in the shower or in the bedroom or just in the living room, wherever you might be, especially access to food. So it's just not really a good fit for temporary housing. And that's one of the challenges that they see. And if people who are aging into it and people who are experiencing the first time, they have significantly different challenges as well. They might have a reputation based on which shelters that they've gone to, other health concerns. They might be kind of labeled with having a mental health concern or aggressive or violent. And then unfortunately, if that adds on to as you're aging, people might miss the geriatric syndromes that will present, which is something Jill and I have seen for the last 2 years that I've been in this role. And unfortunately, sometimes, especially since the shelter system, they might be focused towards women and children, they might be focused to mental health concerns, they might be focused to youth, but they aren't really focused or tailored to seniors. So having that geriatric lens from all the staff, it's really quick for them or easy for them to miss the needs of older adults and not attributing that to some overgeneralization of their abilities, and just saying, this is something that you'll experience because you're aging. And that's another thing that Jill and I have heard a lot, because you're just getting older, when on the other end it's actually something that should be assessed from a geriatric lens and helps establish a proper baseline, because there are different needs for individuals who are aging without housing.
Well said. Well said. At very beginning, we talked about too is I think we're not talking just about people experiencing homelessness, but as you were saying, people on the verge of where do I go? Because life can change in an instant, right? Partner dies, financial situation changes, and then you're facing the unknown. What do I do? How do I get through this? I've never had to look for housing, or I've never had to. So, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. We talked about some of the challenges. Let's talk about some of the solutions. Who's doing this well? Because part of what we do on this podcast is, hey, what can we learn from the rest of Canada, around the world, and duplicate in other places? We'll start with you, Jill, then we'll go to Denise, Alesia, and then Lara.
Yeah, well, to put a positive spin on it, we have lots and lots and lots of opportunities to do better. So I think just, a lot of the, messaging and, just hearing the, very insightful thoughts from the rest of the group. Like, we know that our most vulnerable individuals are falling through the cracks, and individuals who are more vulnerable, more marginalized, are more likely to fall through those cracks in strained systems, which we have a lot of strained systems. And then when you're adding multiple systems that the person needs to navigate, or difficult to navigate systems, and then challenges that make that navigation even harder for the individual, then those cracks deepen. So when we look for our solutions, we need to think of how can we actually build bridges in between these different systems, knowing that a lot of our older adults are going to need to navigate a lot of them and are going to have challenges in navigating them. So, we need to bring together our different sectors. And I think when we look towards those who are doing things well, they not only are working at bridging these different needs, but they're also looking at addressing the personhood and those individual needs of the individual, and also incorporating trauma-informed care, recognizing that a large proportion of our older adults experiencing homelessness have experienced some form of trauma and have experienced significant marginalization throughout their life courses. So some examples that we can think to, one of the sites that Alesia and I go out to, I hope people from Wood Green are listening, but the one location that we go to in Wood Green, it's just a very wonderful place where they have, more intensive case management for the individuals who move there. It's a supportive housing, a modular supportive housing building. I'm trying to think. I guess it would categorize as permanent supportive housing. But they've got some on-site health services, so we're going out there. They have counseling support there. Ability for on-site medications, case managers who can bring individuals to and from appointments, and really very holistic model in terms of how they're delivering care. There's where I did one of the sites that actually inspired, and set me in this career path was when I was in Ottawa doing my inner city health elective. And one of the reasons that we highlighted the Oaks in that paper is, they have, an aging in place model where individuals can, come in at one level of requirement of supports and transition to others, but then also incorporate some of those other individual needs that we know individuals experiencing homelessness may need, and not just individuals experiencing homelessness, but in terms of being able to offer things like a managed alcohol program and harm reduction, and thinking of not just beyond the managed alcohol for harm reduction, but also thinking of our recreational programming, bringing in, what makes something a home, right? That connectivity, that security in a place where people can age in. And then, Lara and some of her colleagues have looked at different long-term care models too, in terms of thinking of different elements that we can actually then bring into long-term cares, or help to design different long-term cares as well. So I think there's lots of opportunity. And what I'd say, first and foremost though, is that with any solution, we need to think about, who might be left behind with our solution, and how do we incorporate for that individuality and those person-centered needs, and forecast what needs there might be as somebody continues to age.
That you just brought so many things forward, Jill. It's good to follow what you've said, but hard to follow what you said too, because you covered so much ground. I guess I would try to reiterate much of what you said. We know, much as is true for our overall healthcare system, our systems of support for those who experience homelessness and housing insecurity is so fragmented and fractured and not coordinated. And so that's certainly an area where I think we have to put a lot of attention. We all know on this panel that we need more housing options and alternatives, and we need a spectrum of possibilities for people. And we need that kind of whole person care, as Jill has been mentioned, of person-centered care. We don't tend to do very well at meeting people where they're at. We look at what the system can provide, and it's often not what they need at any given point in time. And I'm becoming quite interested in reading much more about trauma-informed care, as Jill mentioned again, and the importance of providing trauma-informed care to people who have been severely traumatized and continue to be. But also trauma-informed design is another area where we need to think more about the therapeutics of the environments that people are placed in. For women and gender diverse persons, again, they often get housed in settings that re-traumatize them because they're exposed to people who have perpetuated violence on them in the past. So this kind of cycle of not being able to help everyone in those settings and fulfill some of their needs and help to reduce the trauma that they experience. So the other thing I wanted to add, I guess, on the basis of work that we're doing now in Victoria, is we have some funding to look at system navigators for older women and gender diverse persons, put them in place and not have them affiliated with any single organization, because we kind of want them to have a view of the whole system in terms of what's available. And sometimes those affiliations maybe, again, restrict their sense of options and possibilities. So we're going to introduce these system navigators on the one hand to help women move through the system, hopefully more successfully, and get some of the help they need when they need it to be possibly successful at exiting homelessness. And then the second aspect of this research is to create what we first called community hubs, but people didn't like that terminology. So we moved over to call them community circles. And these will be opportunities for sessions, trying to envision them as 8 sessions at a time kind of thing, to support skill building, budget skills, artistic, creative activities, relationship building, because we know that older women and others as well want relationships, want friendships, want some stability through those avenues. So those are a couple of things that we're trying to work on here and pilot and see what we can learn and continue to grow.
I don't think that there's much for me to add, but just to emphasize that it's a balancing act, really. We're all trying our best. Like a lot of these organizations, they are doing it as well as they can, but also just keeping in mind with the older adult population within geriatrics, especially like I'm not a physician, I'm not a doctor, my background's in social work, but we all realize that the health and the social sides, they're both intertwined and you can't just keep working in silos, right? So just to be transparent with what you're capable of doing and the resources that you're able to offer, and then just tapping into the resource bank and assisting with that smooth transition, the smooth transfer as you're exiting homelessness. Because typically when you find housing and you're put into housing, it might not be in an area that you're familiar with. And so just trying to reorient to the location and figuring out that social piece, it does play into the health piece. So just trying to come back to that balance and act to make sure that we look at both the health and the socialness and working together instead of in silos.
Last but not least.
Acts to follow, and I'll try to be really brief because I would certainly endorse what has already been offered by everyone. The environments, like really thinking about how environments that are not just physical spaces but social, political, economic spaces, and how those enable or disable people. And this is learning that I've started about 10 years ago and anticipate continuing for many, many more years, is just the person-environment interaction and how powerful that can be for the positive, for the good, as well as what we're witnessing, and that potential to see individuals as whole people in a space and place over time, and that they've come from someplace. And this person in front of me who may be really, really distressed and even angry or shouting, I haven't had any opportunity to upset them. But they're bringing that in from an accumulation of really unfortunate experiences oftentimes. And so we have a lot of work to do to just get to the point where we could even come together and talk about what's happening for them. At the same time, the incredible resilience and strengths that people bring into these contexts, that if we can see that, and I come from a discipline that talks about problem-based learning. That's actually how we frame our learning. We are not strengths-oriented professions. Like, that's just not medicine. We are all about the problems and how can we fix them. And so learning from my colleagues in other disciplines who are strengths-oriented, they're cognizant and embrace diversity and inclusivity. And it's not that as physicians we don't want to, or health professionals we don't want to do that. It's just not how our whole world is structured. And so that that opportunity to, create spaces together, not for, but with. And as Denise was saying, really joining people, earning that permission, right? It's establishing some trust such that people allow you to learn about their world. That's what excites me in our work. Is it's never ending learning because of the diversity. The diversity of people as we age and have more and more experiences isn't doing this. Although people might seem to appear, oh, it's the gray wave, it's the silver tsunami, right? All this homogenizing. People are diverse and interesting and full of creativity and life if we give, if we are open to it, and if we can, again, just work together to help people voice that in whatever way that looks like.
Absolutely. Lara, we're going to stay with you. Last question I have for you. Well, there's just one more. I mean, that's more directing us somewhere. But what are your hopes for the future? We're going to start with you. Then we'll go to Alesia, Denise, and end with Jill.
I think I can be pretty quick because I think it is that co-creation with individuals and communities, diverse communities of these places and spaces that allow people to be the people that they are, and for us as workers, right, in our systems, to feel like, okay, yeah, this is where I'm meant to be, and that it's these are enabling environments, and these are environments that don't exclude people in a rigid and sometimes really inhumane ways. They're environments that enable us all to be the best we can be and who we're meant to be. So that's my hope.
Lara, I think I have the better end of the profession. I think I had rose-colored glasses because since I started, it was always solution focused. Obviously, bringing in the pieces that make someone who they are. But I started with doing peer support assessments in the community and bringing people in from social isolation and tying them in together, like transportation, housing, meals. And so like that's all what I live and breathe that. But yeah, just to kind of echo what you're saying, like more collaboration instead of working in silos. I see a lot of people who are like, and it's of course there is like a workload balance as well, but people might say it's not my scope. But I do have the luxury of saying, you know what, let me see if I can find it. Or I honestly don't have the answer for you, but let me see if I can find someone. And then just having that, because it's still the continuation of care, you're continuing to work, continuing to connect, and then you build a resource and you're able to provide a lot more support and ultimately create such a big community.
Yeah. I love those collaboration opportunities. Can I just say that Lara seems like an honorary health and social geographer with her emphasis on place and space and person environment fit. So I love that. I would say my hopes are for adequate resources and creative, innovative solutions. Like if we look at the Victoria environment, there's so many big homes that could be converted into apartments, that could be converted into kind of co-housing types of developments, that people would return to some values about how do we live in community together and look after one another better. We seem sometimes to turn away from responsibility, but also just that deep core value of looking after one another in the ways that we can. So that's one of my hopes, to return to that and to recognize that we all can fall on hard times, and we all need a hand up at times. So that sort of stigmatization that occurs, or the blaming of individuals for their circumstances, I'd like to turn more towards a compassionate, caring society. And I think the last point that I would make on that, and I meant to say it a bit earlier, is that we also need to really value the work of all of the service providers and peer support workers and everyone in the system, because it's such challenging work at times, and burnout and compassion fatigue are huge issues, as they are across the spectrum of health and social service environments.
Tough acts to follow. And I think as Alesia was talking, I was thinking, my hopes for the future is if we could clone Alesia. I think what we just really need, and we actually joke about this a lot within our group, and she's used to hearing this, but what we really need to do is learn from models like ours with Alesia's role is really being part of that linkage between the health, the social, and embracing that connection and continuity of care. And my hopes is that we can learn from this. We can learn from the system navigation studies that Denise is doing. We know that there's evidence from that what the Peach program researched and did on their care navigators. We know that these are solutions that work. And also going back to Denise's comments on what we value. And I think we really need to take a look at societies and systems of what we think is high value healthcare, right? I think a lot of things that we focus on are sometimes quantity over quality. And when we think of the home and that connection as a healthcare intervention, right? I think we need to put that high up there when we think about how we deliver high quality and as part of our values in healthcare. So that would be my hope. And I just hope that people hear some of the attention that's being brought to this issue and want to see the change, and that it inspires some of the change. I think when we published the paper, it did give me a lot of hope for the future, because it seemed like this is just a problem that's being unmasked, right? And people were quite shocked to hear that we've seen individuals newly homeless in their 90s, and people becoming newly homeless who are on long-term care wait lists because of their cognitive impairment that led them to be on that long-term care wait list. People are visibly seeing this problem, and I just hope people are inspired to find their own creative solutions within their environments, and then really embrace that connection. And I'll stop rambling at this.
No, it was great. I love a lot of what you were saying there. First of all, clone Alesia, that's what I got out of that. Right? And then, no, but the housing is health piece. Dr. Andrew Bazzari often talks about that the housing crisis is a health crisis. Right. And so the linkage there. And it is, you did unmask something, because I think often, even when I show up at our Out of the Cold program, it's faith community where people are. And when I see people in their 80s or 90s sleeping on a mat on a church floor, it breaks my heart, right? I'm thinking, how did we fail these individuals? And sometimes I don't, because it's a faith run, we have senior volunteers. I don't know who's volunteering, who's staying there, right? Which another stereotype of people experiencing homelessness, we think, oh, well, that person definitely, well, you don't know. And I'll be talking to someone and they'll say, yeah, so-and-so has been coming for the last 6 weeks. And well, what happens when that seasonal program ends? Right? I mean, and that's just not right for anyone, but especially, people should have the right to age in place and the right to dignified housing. And no doubt with the four of you doing the work that you're doing, we'll continue to push the limits on this. Lastly, before we let you go, you've been very generous with your time. Lara, I know you got a hard stop in a minute, but where can people go to find out more about what you're doing and some of the work you're doing?
Well, they can email me. I'm lnixon@ucalgary.ca. And we do have a website that has quite a bit of our work on it. It's definitely under development. And it's www.hrhopeh.ca, which stands for Harm Reduction Housing for Older People with Experiences of Homelessness. HR HOPE, as we call it.
Fantastic. Denise, how about yourself? People want to find out about the geography that is very human. Where do they go?
They could email me as well, dcluche@uvic.ca, or I also have a LinkedIn profile that people could just search me on, and we could converse on there as well.
Thank you so much. Alesia, how about yourself?
I guess if we're doing emails, because I think Jill and I were just talking about this, I don't think we have anything up yet because we're such a brand new program and
Yeah.
we're funded by grant money. But yeah, my first name, Alesia.campbell@unityhealth.to. I always joke about how flexible and available I am, to where it sounds like a sickness, whereas like when am I not working? But I try to help out wherever I can because honestly, that's all you can do. And then we are affiliated with Unity Health Toronto.
Awesome. Thank you. So, your energy, if I could clone that, and with our energy, with your positivity too. I mean, people have been out doing the work that you're doing. Denise talked about the burnout rate, and it really can when that's what you're hearing all the time. But you know what? You are definitely a ray of sunshine in the outreach world. So thank you for that.
Since
Thank you for all
since
you
I
do.
was in high school, Michael, since I was in high school, I wanted to do this. So
Yeah, that's incredible. Awesome. Well, we're lucky that you followed your dream. Jill, how about the work for people who want to check out the research paper, even that most people have seen it, but if they haven't been living under a rock, where can you see that research? Where can they find out more about the work?
So that would be in the Canadian Medical Association Journal in their May issue. I'm not sure if you have the direct link, but I can send that your way. I think it's a free paper,
Open
so you
access.
don't need it's open access, so you don't need to pay to get it. And yeah, so feel free to email me as well if you want to hear more about the work Alesia and I are doing. And or if somebody wanted to volunteer and build us a website, because we don't have we really, as we're doing this, I'm like, oh, we should have a website, or something somewhere that just shows a little bit about what we do. We just created a one pager on the program, and I'm not on social media, so we
neither am I.
really don't have any social media to connect with either.
That's because you're too busy doing good things to spend that silly time there. And I am so grateful for all of your time. Thank you for coming on today, for educating myself and our listeners. So appreciated. Keep doing the wonderful work that you're doing. And hopefully we'll see more research and more work being done and more solutions coming forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Thanks
much
for
for
having
having
us.